The Grand Council chamber on Vareth Station was built for beings who did not like surprises. Its walls were smooth black stone, mined from a dead moon, and polished until it looked like a piece of the night sky. 500 delegates from 40 different worlds sat in curved rows that rose up toward the high ceiling. In the center of the room floated a giant hologram of the galaxy, slowly turning, its billions of stars glowing soft gold and blue. Captain Elena Reyes stood at the bottom of that chamber, in the small circle reserved for whoever was speaking. She was human, 41 years old, with short dark hair, and tired eyes that had seen too many committee meetings. Around her, the alien delegates watched with a particular kind of silence that meant they were not impressed. "Let me understand this correctly," said Counselor Threx, a tall being from the Skarn homeworld, his gray skin catching the light of the hologram. "Your species wishes to send a ship beyond the edge of the galaxy, into the void between galaxies. A region with no stars, no light, no way to fix your position, and radiation levels that will kill an unprotected crew within days." "That is correct," Elena said. "No ship in recorded history has survived more than a few hours in that region," Threx said. "Not Skarn ships, not Voth ships, not even the old Illyri exploration vessels, and the Illyri built ships before your species learned to make fire." A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the chamber. Elena did not flinch. "We are aware of the risks," she said. "We built our ship to handle them." "You built a ship," Threx repeated, as if the words themselves were funny. "Human, you have been part of this council for 11 years. 11 years. Out of the tens of thousands of years some of these worlds have contributed to galactic knowledge. Your species is a child in this room, and children like to jump into deep water because they do not yet understand what drowning means." Elena kept her hands folded behind her back, the way her old commanding officer had taught her. "Stay calm. Let them talk. Words do not sink ships." "With respect, Counselor," she said, 11 years is enough time for us to notice something. Every species in this council believes the void beyond the galaxy is death. Not one of you has ever sent a ship far enough to actually prove it. You believe it because your ancestors believed it, and because believing it is safer than testing it." The chamber went quiet in a different way now. Not amused, alert. "We are not afraid to test it," Elena continued. "That is the difference between us." 6 months earlier, the idea had started in a much smaller room, 3 floors underground, on a research station orbiting Jupiter. Dr. Aisha Osei, the lead engineer of the Void Drive project, had been working for 9 years on a single problem. How do you build an engine that does not need stars to navigate by? Every faster-than-light drive used by every species in the galaxy depended on gravity wells. Ships jumped from star system to star system, using the massive suns and planets to fold space and cut travel time. It worked beautifully inside a galaxy, where stars were never too far apart. But between galaxies, in the vast emptiness that separated one great spinning disk of stars from another, there was nothing. No gravity wells, no beacons, no way to know if you were pointed the right direction, or any direction at all. Aisha had grown up in Lagos, watching old documentaries about human explorers who sailed oceans without knowing what was on the other side. Magellan, the first astronauts who left Earth's orbit, not knowing if they would come back. She used to tell her team, every great discovery started with someone doing something everyone else called impossible. We're good at that. It's basically our whole history. Her drive, which she named the Threadwalker, did not use gravity wells at all. Instead, it used a network of quantum-linked beacons that the ship would drop behind itself as it moved, like a spider spinning a thread as it crawled. Even in total emptiness, the ship could always find its way back to any point along that thread. It was slower than a normal jump drive. It was also the only system in existence that could work in a place with nothing to hold on to. The ship built around this engine was called the Horizon's Reach. It was smaller than most exploration vessels, only 80 meters long, built with triple reinforced hull plating and radiation shielding that had taken 3 separate human shipyards 2 years to manufacture. It did not look impressive next to the great silver cruisers of the Voth or the crystal-hulled ships of the Illyri. It looked like what it was, a small, stubborn, determined machine built by a species that refused to be told no. The council debate lasted 4 hours. In the end, they voted to allow the mission, though Elena suspected the real reason was not respect. It was convenience. Several delegates, especially the Skarn, seemed almost pleased at the idea of humans throwing away a ship and a crew on a fool's errand. It would settle the argument once and for all, they said quietly to each other. It would show the younger species its proper place. Councillor Threx approached Elena after the vote, his gray face unreadable. I will be joining your crew as an observer, he said. The council requires proof of what happens out there. Proof that comes from a reliable source. Elena raised an eyebrow. You're volunteering to fly into what you called certain death? I am not volunteering, Threx said. I am being sent. There is a difference. But I intend to survive it, Captain. And I intend to bring back evidence of your failure, so that this argument never comes up again. Fair enough, Elena said. Pack warm. 3 weeks later, the Horizon's Reach undocked from Earth's orbital shipyard. The crew numbered 12. Elena commanded from the bridge, with First Officer Marcus Chen at her right side, a broad-shouldered man from Toronto who had flown supply runs to the outer colonies for 15 years before joining the Exploration Corps. Aisha Osei ran engineering, along with her small team who had personally built every major system on the ship and knew it better than they knew their own homes. A young navigator named Priya Anand managed the Threadwalker beacon network. A doctor, a communications officer, security personnel, and 2 scientists rounded out the rest. And then there was Threx, given quarters near the bridge, watching everything with the careful eyes of someone counting down the days until he could say, I told you so. The send-off from Earth was smaller than Elena expected. No parades, no grand speeches from world leaders. Humanity had learned, over its short time among the stars, not to celebrate too loudly before a mission succeeded. But millions of people watched the departure feed anyway, in kitchens and classrooms and hospital rooms around the world, because everyone understood what this ship was trying to do, even if the physics went over most people's heads. It was trying to go somewhere nobody had gone. It was trying to come back from somewhere nobody thought you could come back from. Elena's mother called her the night before launch. She was 83 years old, and had watched Elena grow up wanting to be an astronaut since she was 6. You know what your grandfather used to say, her mother said, her voice crackling slightly over the connection. The ocean doesn't care if you're scared of it. It only cares if you know how to swim. I know how to swim, Mom, Elena said, smiling despite herself. I know you do, baby. Just remember to come home. The first 2 weeks of the journey were ordinary, at least by the standards of deep space exploration. The Horizon's Reach moved through the outer edge of human territory, past the last small mining colonies clinging to asteroids in the dark, past the final relay beacon that connected the ship to the rest of galactic communication. Beyond that point, they were on their own. The galaxy's spiral disk was enormous, but even so, it had an edge, a place where the density of stars began to thin and thin, until there was nothing but scattered points of light, separated by trillions of empty kilometers. It took the ship another 6 weeks of steady travel, to reach what the scientists called the threshold, the last real star system, before true emptiness began. Elena stood on the bridge, watching the view screen, as the ship approached a single, small red star, the last light, for a very long way, in any direction. This is it, Priya said quietly from her station. Past this point, the Threadwalker beacons take over completely. No more starlight to navigate by. How do you feel about that, Counselor? Elena asked, glancing toward Threx, who stood near the back of the bridge with his arms folded. I feel, Threx said slowly, that I am about to witness either a remarkable achievement or a very predictable tragedy. I have not yet decided which. You'll get your answer soon enough, Elena said. She turned back to the view screen. The red star slid past on the left side of the display, small and dim and lonely. Ahead of them was nothing. No stars, no light, just black, stretching out farther than any sensor could measure, farther than any species had ever dared to travel. Marcus leaned toward her. Last chance to turn back, Captain. Elena thought about the council chamber. She thought about Threx's voice calling humanity a child. She thought about her grandfather and the ocean that did not care if you were scared of it. Take us in, she said. Aisha's voice came over the comm from engineering, steady and sure. Threadwalker engine online. Beacon deployment ready. On your word, Captain. Elena took one last look at the fading light of the red star behind them, then faced forward, toward the true dark. Deploy the first beacon, she said. Let's go somewhere nobody has ever been. The ship shuddered gently as the engine engaged, a small pulse of light flashing behind them as the first beacon dropped into place. A single thread stretched out into the endless black. The horizon's reach moved forward, past the edge of the galaxy, into the void that every other species in the Council believed was a graveyard. Behind them, the golden light of 100 billion stars slowly shrank into a distant glow, and then, for the first time in the history of any known civilization, a crewed ship crossed fully out of the galaxy and into the emptiness beyond. No one on Vareth Station knew it yet, but the true story of the horizon's reach was only just beginning, and nothing about what waited for them out in the dark would match anyone's expectations, not the Council's, not the crew's, and certainly not Counselor Threx's. For now, there was only the ship, the crew, and the endless dark ahead of them, waiting to be crossed. The dark outside the horizon's reach was not like the dark of normal space. Inside the galaxy, even the emptiest patch of space still had starlight somewhere, a distant point of white or blue that told you which way was which. Out here, past the last red star of the threshold, there was nothing, no light, no reference point, just black in every direction, so complete that the view screen looked like it had simply turned off. Elena Reyes stood on the bridge during the first week and found herself doing something she had not expected, avoiding the main view screen. It was not fear, exactly. It was the strange discomfort of a mind that had spent its whole life understanding up and down and forward, suddenly having none of those things to hold on to. You get used to it, Marcus told her, though his own voice carried the same edge. Or you don't, and you learn to work anyway. Aisha Osei's engineering team worked around the clock those first days, monitoring every system with a level of attention usually reserved for launch day. The Threadwalker engine hummed steadily in the belly of the ship, dropping a new quantum beacon every few hours, each one a tiny anchor point in the emptiness that the ship could always find its way back to. So far, everything was working exactly as designed. Radiation levels are within safe limits, Aisha reported during the daily briefing on day 9. Shielding is holding at 98% efficiency. If anything, we're doing better out here than the simulations predicted. And the beacon network? Elena asked. Solid. We've dropped 41 beacons so far. Signal strength between them is strong. If we needed to turn around right now, we could follow the thread home, in about the same time it took us to get here. Counselor Threx, seated at the edge of the briefing table, made a small sound that might have been surprise or might have been simple disbelief. You built this system to work, he said, almost to himself. Not to attempt to work, to actually work. That's usually the goal, yeah, Aisha said, not quite hiding her smile. The trouble started on day 16. It began small. A flicker in the ship's internal sensors, a half-second of static across every screen on the bridge. Then it happened again, longer this time, nearly 3 full seconds where every display on the ship went to snow. Report, Elena said, already moving to the command chair. Unknown interference, said the communications officer, a quiet young man named Dev Patel. It's not coming from our systems. It's coming from outside the hull. Outside? There's nothing outside, Marcus said. There's nothing out here at all. But there was something. The sensors, once they stabilized, began picking up a strange kind of radiation, unlike anything in the ship's databases. It did not come from a single source. It seemed to be everywhere around them, a faint background hum of energy that pulsed at irregular intervals, almost like a heartbeat. Could be some kind of cosmic background effect, one of the scientists suggested. Leftover energy from the space between galaxies. Nobody's ever measured this region up close before. We might just be seeing something that's always been here. Or it could be something else, Threx said quietly. Elena looked at him. You have a theory, Counselor. I have old stories, Threx said. Skarn legends, thousands of years old, about what lies beyond the edge of the galaxy. My people stopped telling them as science long ago, and started telling them as myths, the way your species tells stories about monsters in the deep ocean. But every myth begins somewhere, Captain. Perhaps this is where ours began. What do the stories say? Elena asked. Threx hesitated, then answered. That the void is not empty, that something old lives out here, something that predates our galaxy's current age. something that sleeps most of the time but occasionally stirs. The bridge went quiet. Outside, the strange pulse of radiation continued, steady as a slow heartbeat in the dark. For the next several weeks, life on the horizon's reach settled into a careful rhythm. The crew worked their shifts, monitored the readings, and slowly grew accustomed to the endless black outside. Elena made sure everyone kept busy. Idle minds in a place like this were dangerous, she knew, and the human mind was not built to stare into true nothingness for too long without something to hold on to. She organized movie nights in the mess hall, old films projected onto the wall. The crew crowded together with rationed snacks, laughing at jokes that were decades old, just to hear the sound of laughter, in a place that swallowed sound so easily. She kept training drills going, even though there was little left to train for out here. She made sure people talked to their families back home through the long-range comm, even though messages took hours to reach the last relay beacon, and hours more to return. A strange, slow-motion conversation stretched across the dark. Threx watched all of this with growing curiosity. He had expected panic. He had expected the crew to fracture under the pressure of true isolation, the kind no Skarn crew had ever willingly faced. Instead, he watched them grow closer. He watched Aisha teach the security officers how basic reactor mechanics worked, just to give them something new to learn. He watched Dev Patel write letters to his daughter back on Earth every single night, even though he would not be able to send them for months. He watched Elena walk the corridors at odd hours, checking on her crew not because regulations demanded it, but because she seemed to genuinely need to know they were all right. "You are not what I expected," Threx admitted to her one evening, finding her alone in the observation lounge, staring at the black view screen. "What did you expect?" Elena asked. "Recklessness. Arrogance. A young species proving a point it did not understand the cost of." He paused. "Instead, I see discipline. And something else. A kind of stubbornness that refuses to become despair." Elena smiled faintly. "We call it hope, counselor. It's not the same as being naive. We know exactly how dangerous this is. We just decided the not knowing was worse than the danger." On day 51, contact with the last relay beacon was lost entirely. The distance had simply grown too great, even for the specially boosted long-range comm array the engineers had built into the ship. For the first time since launch, the horizon's reach was completely, utterly alone, cut off from every other living voice in the galaxy. Back on Vareth Station, this loss of contact was noted in the official council records with a brief, cold entry. Human vessel Horizon's reach, presumed lost beyond communication range. Estimated survival probability, negligible. There was, predictably, no formal mourning ceremony. A few delegates mentioned it in passing, mostly to reinforce the argument that had started the whole affair. Proof, they said, that the void could not be crossed, that some limits existed for a reason, that humanity's ambition had finally caught up with its capabilities. But on Earth, the reaction was different. Millions of people who had watched the launch continued to check the news every single day, waiting for any update, even though officials explained clearly that no update should be expected for months, possibly longer. Vigils were held in cities around the world, not out of despair, but out of something closer to stubborn faith. Elena's mother kept a small light burning in her kitchen window every night, a tradition she had started the day her daughter left and refused to stop, no matter what the council's official record said. Aboard the ship itself, the crew did not know any of this, of course. They only knew that they were now truly cut off, sailing forward into darkness, with no way to call for help, and no way to know if anyone back home even remembered they existed. "We could turn back now," Marcus said quietly to Elena, during a private moment on the bridge. "We've proven the drive works. We've survived this long. Nobody would blame us for heading home." Elena thought about it for a long moment. She owed her crew an honest answer, not a brave one. "How much further can we push safely?" she finally asked. "Aisha says the shielding is holding steady. Power reserves are good. If we wanted to, we could keep going for months more, before we'd need to seriously worry." Elena looked out at the black view screen, at the strange, faint pulse of radiation still beating steadily, somewhere out in the dark, like the void itself was breathing. "We didn't come all this way to turn back the second it got hard," she said. "Let's see what's actually out here. Then we'll decide." It was on day 68 that the sensors detected something that was not background radiation. Not cosmic noise. Not any natural phenomenon the scientists could explain. It was a shape. Faint, massive, and unmistakably artificial, drifting silently in the black, roughly 200,000 kilometers off their current heading. The sensors struggled to get a clear reading at first, the strange ambient radiation of the void interfering with the scans. But slowly, piece by piece, an image began to form on the display. It looked like a structure, enormous, easily larger than any station humanity had ever built, its surface covered in long curved ridges that caught what little light there was and reflected it back in strange shifting patterns, almost like scales. The entire bridge went silent. Even Threx, who had spent his whole life trained to remain composed in front of lesser species, stared at the screen with wide, unguarded eyes. That, he said slowly, should not be here. Nothing should be here. Well, Elena said, her voice steadied despite the pounding of her own heart. Looks like the stories were wrong about one thing, counselor. What's that? The void isn't empty after all? She turned to her crew, 12 human faces and one alien observer, all staring at the massive silent shape drifting in the eternal dark ahead of them, and gave the order that would change everything that came after. Bring us closer, slowly. Let's find out what we've found. The horizon's reach moved forward into the unknown, its small lights cutting a thin path through the endless black, heading toward a discovery that no map, no legend, and no council record had ever prepared anyone for. The structure grew larger with every hour the horizon's reach crept toward it. What had first looked like a single massive shape on the sensors slowly revealed itself to be something far stranger. Not one object, but thousands of pieces, connected by long curving arms of dark metal, spread out across a region of space wider than most star systems. It's not a station, Aisha said, studying the readings from her console in engineering, her voice tight with focus. Stations have power cores, life support, docking bays. This thing has none of that, or at least, none that we recognize. Then what is it? Elena asked. Honestly, Captain? I think it might be a library. The bridge crew turned to look at her through the comm display. There are patterns repeating across the surface, Aisha continued. Thousands of them, each one slightly different, arranged in long rows across every one of those curved sections. It reminds me of something a friend of mine studies back on Earth. Ancient clay tablets, cuneiform, that kind of thing. Rows of symbols, meant to be read in sequence. Except this is on a scale of kilometers, not centimeters. Threx leaned forward, staring at the image on the main screen, with an intensity Elena had not seen from him before. There are Skarn creation myths, he said slowly, that speak of the first builders. A race said to have shaped the early galaxy before any of our species existed, who eventually left it behind, to explore what lay beyond. My people always assumed these were simply stories, meant to explain what we could not understand. Origin tales, nothing more. Looks like your ancestors were better historians than storytellers, Marcus said quietly. The ship drew close enough to attempt a full sensor sweep, and what they found silenced the bridge for a long moment. The structure was ancient. The scientists' best estimate placed its age at nearly 2 million years, though the readings were unreliable given how unfamiliar the materials were. There was no active power source detected anywhere on its surface. Whatever built it, whatever purpose it once served, it had been sitting silent and dark in the void for longer than human civilization had existed on Earth. But it was not entirely dead. I'm reading a small pocket of active energy, Dev reported from communications, deep inside the central structure. It's faint, but it's there. Something in there still has power. Elena weighed the decision carefully. Every instinct told her this was exactly the kind of discovery that could go catastrophically wrong. An ancient, unknown structure, built by a vanished civilization, with an active power source of unknown purpose. It was also, without question, the most important discovery any living species had ever made about the space beyond the galaxy. We didn't come this far to leave without answers, she said finally. Marcus, Aisha, Threx, you're with me. Dev, keep the ship ready to pull us out the second something looks wrong. Everyone else, standard away team protocols. The interior of the structure was unlike anything the away team had trained for. The corridors, if they could be called that, were vast, wide enough to fit the entire horizon's reach through with room to spare. their walls covered in the same rippling scale-like patterns visible from outside. Emergency lights from their suits cast long shadows across surfaces that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light, giving the whole place a strange, dreamlike quality. No dust, Aisha noted, running a gloved hand along the wall. No decay. Whatever this material is, it hasn't degraded in 2 million years. We don't have anything on Earth that could do that. They moved deeper, following the faint energy signature, passing through chamber after chamber, filled with more of the strange symbol patterns. Threx paused often, studying them, with an expression of quiet awe that Elena had never seen on his face before. "I can read some of it," he said eventually, stopping in front of a particularly large panel. "Not the words themselves, but the structure. It repeats certain shapes the way Scarn mathematical notation repeats certain shapes. I believe this may be some kind of technical record. Instructions, perhaps. Or a warning." "A warning about what?" Marcus asked. Threx did not answer right away. He was staring at a section of the panel where the pattern changed, becoming sharper, more urgent-looking, repeated over and over in a way that even without understanding the language, felt unmistakably like alarm. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I do not like the way it is written." They found the active power source in the deepest chamber, a room shaped like a sphere, its interior lined with the same scale patterns, all of them faintly glowing now with a dim, pulsing blue light that matched the strange radiation the ship had detected weeks earlier. In the center of the chamber floated a single object, a smooth, dark sphere, roughly the size of a human head, suspended in the air with no visible support, humming softly. "Do not touch it," Threx said quickly, as Marcus reached toward it out of pure instinct. "Wasn't planning to," Marcus said, pulling his hand back. "Just wanted a closer look." Aisha ran her scanner over the object slowly. "It's not a weapon," she said after a moment. "At least, I don't think so. The energy signature is closer to a data storage system, a massive one. This might be some kind of archive core." Elena studied the object floating silently before them. "Can we access it?" "Maybe," Aisha said. "I'd need time. And honestly, Captain, I'd need to not be terrified of breaking something 2 million years old that we don't understand." Elena allowed herself a small smile, despite the tension in the room. "Take the time you need. We're not going anywhere until we understand what we've found." It took 9 days. Aisha worked with careful, patient determination, running gentle scans, cross-referencing the strange symbol patterns with every scrap of data the ship's computers could offer, slowly building a rudimentary translation framework with Threx's help. It was slow, painstaking work, the kind that required equal parts brilliance and stubbornness, and Elena had never seen anyone display more of both. On the 9th day, the sphere finally responded to their careful queries, and a stream of information began pouring into the ship's systems. Not words, not exactly, but something the human mind could interpret as a kind of layered, visual language, images and diagrams, and mathematical sequences that unfolded like a story, told without a single spoken word. What they learned changed everything. The structure had indeed been built by the first builders, a civilization that had shaped much of the early galaxy, before departing to explore the wider universe millions of years ago. But the first builders had not simply left, they had been driven out, or rather, driven into the void, by something that emerged from beyond the edges of known space during their era, something the records referred to, in the closest translation Threx and Aisha could manage, as the Devourer Swarm. It was not a single creature, nor a single fleet, but something closer to a slow-moving ecosystem of energy-consuming organisms, vast beyond comprehension, that drifted through the emptiness between galaxies, drawn toward concentrations of stars and life, the way a moth is drawn toward light. It had passed through this region of the void once before, long ago, and the first builders had built this structure, this archive, this library, this warning, specifically to alert whoever might come after them. According to the ancient records, the swarm moved in cycles spanning millions of years, drifting from galaxy to galaxy across the vast emptiness, consuming and dormant in turns. And according to the timestamps embedded in the archive's final entries, the swarm was due to complete another cycle very soon. It was heading toward the galaxy the humans called home. "How soon is soon?" Elena asked, her voice quiet in the humming chamber. Threx worked through the calculations slowly, cross-referencing dates that used a system of measurement none of them fully understood. When he finally looked up, his gray face had gone pale. "Based on the drift patterns recorded here," he said, "and its last known position before the archive went dormant, the swarm could reach the edge of our galaxy within the next several years, possibly sooner." Silence filled the chamber. "We need to warn the Council," Marcus said finally. "We need to do more than warn them," Elena said. "This archive has data the Council has never seen. Technology, records of how the first builders fought this thing, or at least survived it. If we're going to face something like this, we can't do it with what we already have. We need everything this place can teach us." Aisha was already running new scans, her exhaustion forgotten, replaced by the singular focus Elena had seen in her only a handful of times before. "There's more down here," she said. "Entire sections of the archive we haven't even touched. Weapon schematics, shield designs. Something about a defense network the first builders built before they finally left this place behind." "Then we take what we can," Elena said, "and we get back home as fast as this ship can possibly move." The next several weeks were the most intense of the entire mission. The away team worked in shifts, barely resting, extracting as much of the archive's data as the ship's systems could hold, while Aisha's engineering team began the delicate, painstaking work of studying fragments of first builder technology recovered from the structure's outer sections, technology that, incredibly, seemed compatible with modifications to the Horizon's reach itself. By the time they were ready to leave, the ship had changed. New alloy plating, grown from a slow chemical process using materials harvested from the archive's outer shell, had been fused onto key sections of the hull, giving it a strange, faintly glowing quality along its seams. The Threadwalker engine had been enhanced using principles drawn from the first builder's own void-crossing technology, promising a return journey significantly faster than the trip out. And deep in the ship's data core, an entire library of ancient knowledge sat waiting to be shared with a galaxy that had no idea what was coming for it. Threx stood beside Elena on the bridge as the ship prepared to depart the archive, staring back at the massive silent structure floating in the eternal dark, its rows of ancient warnings finally read after 2 million years of silence. "You realize," he said quietly, "that when we return with this information, no one will believe us at first." "They didn't believe we'd survive this long either," Elena said. "We'll manage." "I owe you an apology, Captain," Threx said. "I called your species a child in that council chamber. I was wrong. A child does not carry a warning like this one back, to save people who never believed in them in the first place." Elena looked at him, then back at the archive, then finally forward, toward the distant golden glow of the galaxy waiting somewhere far ahead in the dark. "Save the apology, Counselor," she said. "Save it for when we've actually stopped this thing. Right now, we've got a warning to deliver, and a whole galaxy that needs to hear it, whether they're ready to believe us or not." The Horizon's reach, changed and glowing faintly with ancient technology, turned away from the silent archive and began its long journey home, carrying with it the one thing the entire galaxy needed and did not yet know it was missing: time to prepare. Back in the galaxy, time had not stood still. 8 months had passed since the Horizon's reach lost contact with the last relay beacon, and in that time, the story of the small human ship that flew into the void had faded from most conversations on Vareth Station. There had been no memorial, no formal announcement of loss, only a quiet entry in the Council's records and the slow, natural way that people everywhere move on from things they never truly believed in. Councillor Threx's seat in the chamber had been temporarily filled by a Skarn deputy, an older and more cautious man named Vesic who had little interest in reopening old arguments about reckless young species and their reckless young ambitions. When the subject came up at all, it was usually mentioned as a settled matter, a lesson everyone had already learned. "The humans proved the void cannot be crossed," Vesic said during one routine session, several months after the Horizon's reach disappeared. "A tragic loss, but not a surprising one. Perhaps now this council can return its attention to matters that actually concern galactic stability." On Earth, things were different. The vigils continued, smaller now but no less determined. Elena's mother still kept her light burning in the kitchen window every night. Aisha's younger brother had started a small online group where people shared theories, hopes, and the occasional bit of hard science about long-range communication delays. refusing to accept the silence as an ending. Marcus's family held a quiet dinner every month on the date the ship had launched, a tradition that had started as mourning and slowly become something closer to faith. Human space agencies, for their part, never officially declared the mission lost. There was no protocol requiring them to, and more than that, there was simply no appetite among the people running those agencies to give up on 12 of their own before every possibility had truly been exhausted. It was, some of the alien delegates privately noted, a very human kind of stubbornness, refusing to accept an ending simply because the ending had not been proven yet. They did not know how right that stubbornness would turn out to be. Aboard the Horizon's Reach, the return journey moved faster than anyone aboard had dared to hope. The enhanced Threadwalker engine, rebuilt using principles drawn from the first builder's own archive, cut travel time nearly in half. Where the trip out had taken 68 days to reach the ancient structure, the ship now covered the same void in just over 5 weeks, its glowing hull cutting through the endless black with a confidence it had not carried on the way out. The crew used every spare moment of the journey studying the archive data more closely, cross-referencing schematics, running simulations of the defense technology the first builders had left behind. Aisha barely slept, driven by the knowledge that every hour they spent understanding this technology was an hour they would not have to spend once they reached home, and the real work of preparing the galaxy began. The shield technology is the most promising, she told Elena during one of their nightly briefings, dark circles under her eyes, but her voice sharp with focus. It's not like anything we currently use. Instead of deflecting energy, it absorbs it and redirects it back outward in a controlled pulse. If the swarm really does feed on energy, the way the archive suggests, a weapon like this could theoretically starve sections of it, instead of just damaging it. Theoretically, Elena repeated. Theoretically, Aisha agreed. We haven't been able to test it against anything remotely like the swarm, but it's more than anyone else in this galaxy currently has. It's a start. Threx spent much of the return journey working alongside Aisha and the ship's 2 scientists, slowly building a more complete picture of the first builder's final records that grew increasingly urgent, increasingly desperate, in their final entries, before the archive fell silent millions of years ago. They did not defeat the swarm, he told Elena one evening, the weight of the discovery clear in his voice. The final records make that clear. They survived it. They drove it away, at great cost, using technology and coordination, on a scale I do not think any current galactic civilization could match on its own. On its own, Elena repeated. But together? Threx looked at her for a long moment. Together, perhaps, if every species in this galaxy set aside its pride and its old grudges and worked as one, the way the first builders apparently worked with the allies described in these records. It is possible. Then that's what we ask them to do, Elena said simply. It's not like we have another option. The moment the Horizon's Reach crossed back into the outer edge of the galaxy, past the small red star at the threshold, was quieter than anyone expected. There were no crowds waiting, no ships sent to greet them, because no one knew they were coming. The long-range relay beacon picked up their signal almost by accident, a routine automated system flagging an unidentified vessel entering restricted deep space territory. The confusion at the receiving station lasted almost 20 minutes before someone finally cross-referenced the ship's registration code and realized, with a shock that spread through the entire outpost within seconds, exactly what they were looking at. Horizon's Reach, requesting priority relay to Earth Command and Vareth Station Council Chamber. This is Captain Elena Reyes. We have returned from beyond the galaxy, and we are carrying information that affects every species in this council. Please relay immediately. This is not a drill. The message reached Earth first. Within minutes, it had been confirmed, verified, and confirmed again by 3 separate agencies who could not quite believe what they were reading. Word spread through human space faster than any official channel could manage, jumping from official broadcasts to personal messages to news feeds within the hour. A ship everyone had quietly given up on had not only survived, it had come back. Elena's mother was in her kitchen when the news broke. She did not turn off the light in the window. She simply stood there for a long moment, one hand pressed against her mouth, before finally allowing herself to cry. The reaction on Vareth Station was more complicated. The message reached the council chamber during a routine session, interrupting a minor trade dispute between two delegations. When the automated translator finished relaying the content of the transmission, the chamber fell into a silence unlike any Elena would later hear described from anyone who had been present that day. Deputy Vesic, who had spent months treating the human mission as a settled, tragic matter, read the message twice before speaking. "This is either an extraordinary discovery," he said slowly, "or an elaborate deception. I recommend extreme caution before this council commits to any response." But the message included something Vesic and the other skeptical delegates had not anticipated: a data packet from Councillor Threx himself, verified with his personal council credentials, confirming every word of the human report, and adding his own account of everything they had witnessed and recovered. "I have seen the archive myself," Threx's message read, in his own careful, formal words. "I have read the warnings left by the first builders. I have studied the timeline of the Devourer Swarm's approach. What the humans are reporting is not exaggeration. If anything, they have understated the urgency of what we face. I recommend this council convene an emergency session the moment the Horizon's Reach arrives, and I recommend every delegate present set aside skepticism long enough to actually listen." That, more than anything else, was what finally moved the council to action. Threx had built his reputation over decades as one of the most cautious, skeptical voices in the entire chamber. If he was willing to stake that reputation on the human report, the other delegates understood, however reluctantly, that this was not something to dismiss. The Horizon's Reach arrived at Vareth Station 11 days later, its glowing, altered hull drawing crowds of curious onlookers along the station's viewing platforms, delegates and citizens alike gathering to watch the small ship that had done what no one believed possible, dock quietly at the council's primary bay. Elena led her crew off the ship into a waiting crowd of officials, cameras, and delegates from a dozen different species, all of them watching with expressions ranging from disbelief to open awe. She was exhausted in a way that went deeper than sleep could fix, her uniform worn thin from months of wear, but she walked forward with the same steady composure she had carried into the council chamber nearly a year earlier. Deputy Vesic met her at the front of the crowd, his gray, scarred face carefully neutral, though Elena thought she caught something close to genuine respect beneath the practiced diplomacy. "Captain Reyes," he said, "the council is prepared to hear your report. Immediately, if you are able." "I've been ready to give this report for 8 months, Deputy," Elena said. "I think we can manage immediately." The full council chamber was packed beyond capacity when Elena stood once more in the small speaking circle at its center, this time flanked not just by Threx, but by Aisha, Marcus, and the full data record of everything the archive had revealed. The great hologram of the galaxy still turned slowly overhead, its billions of stars glowing gold and blue, utterly unaware of the storm gathering somewhere in the dark beyond its edge. 11 months ago, Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber, "I stood in this room and was told that no human ship could survive the void beyond our galaxy. I was told our ambition had outpaced our understanding. I was told, quite plainly, that we were a young species making an old, foolish mistake." She paused, letting the silence settle over the chamber. "We did survive. And what we found out there is not a story about human recklessness. It's a warning, left behind 2 million years ago, by a civilization far older than any species in this room, about a threat that is coming for every single one of us, whether we are ready or not." The hologram above them flickered, and a new image began to form in its place, the first data pulled from the archive, the ancient warnings of the first builders, and the slow, terrible shape of the Devourer Swarm, drifting steadily closer to the edge of the galaxy every single day that passed. For the first time since Elena had entered that chamber nearly a year ago, no one in the council laughed, no one dismissed her, and no one called humanity a child. They simply listened, because for the first time, they understood exactly how much was at stake, and exactly how little time they had left to prepare for what was coming. The 2 years that followed the Horizon's Reach's return were unlike anything the galaxy had experienced in living memory. For the first time since the Council's founding, every major species set aside old rivalries and worked toward a single shared purpose. The archive data recovered from the first builder's structure was shared openly, translated, studied, and distributed to shipyards and research stations across 100 worlds. Old trade disputes were quietly shelved. Border tensions between the Voth and Illyri territories, simmering for over a century, were set aside, without ceremony, because everyone understood, in the end, that none of it would matter if the Devourer swarm reached the galaxy unopposed. Humanity, once treated as the Council's youngest and least respected member, found itself at the very center of the preparation effort. It was Aisha Osei, who led the Joint Engineering Task Force that adapted First Builder shield technology for use across dozens of different ship designs. It was Elena Reyes who was asked, reluctantly at first and then with growing confidence from the other delegates, to help coordinate the combined defense fleet's strategic planning, drawing on human military doctrine that other species had once considered crude and undisciplined. It was Threx, once the mission's harshest skeptic, who became one of its most passionate advocates, spending countless hours in the council chamber, convincing delegation after delegation that the threat was real and that only unity could meet it. "It is strange," Threx admitted to Elena one evening, the two of them standing on an observation deck overlooking the growing defense fleet being assembled at the edge of human territory, "that it took the return of your ship to finally make this council behave the way it always should have. Nothing brings people together like a shared reason to be scared," Elena said. "We're not that different from you, Counselor. We just got there first." The Devourer swarm arrived at the edge of the galaxy, 18 months after the Council received the Horizons Reach's warning, exactly within the range Threx's calculations had predicted. It did not arrive as a single fleet, the way the delegates had expected based on their experience with ordinary warfare. It arrived as a vast, slow-moving cloud, stretching across a region of space larger than entire star systems, its edges glowing faintly with the strange consuming energy that had first been detected as background radiation nearly 2 years earlier. The combined fleet, assembled from ships of a dozen different species and built around technology drawn from a 2-million-year-old archive, waited at the boundary of the galaxy's outer stars, the largest coordinated defense force in recorded history. The Horizons Reach led the formation, its hull now fully rebuilt with First Builder alloy, glowing with the same faint blue light that had once seemed so alien and unsettling in the depths of the ancient archive. Elena commanded from the bridge, Marcus at her side, Aisha coordinating the fleet's shield network from engineering, and Threx present as the Council's official liaison, no longer an observer sent to document a failure, but a full participant in what everyone now understood was the most important battle the galaxy had ever fought. "Swarm formations entering engagement range," Dev reported, his voice steady despite the tension gripping the bridge. "All fleet elements report shields active and holding." "Signal the fleet," Elena said. "Begin the pulse sequence, exactly as we rehearsed." Across the assembled formation, hundreds of ships activated the modified First Builder shielding in careful, coordinated waves, absorbing the leading edge of the swarm's consuming energy and redirecting it back outward in controlled pulses, exactly as the ancient records had described. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It did not destroy the swarm outright, but it did something the First Builder's final records had promised. It hurt. It disrupted whatever strange, energy-hungry process drove the swarm forward, forcing sections of the vast cloud to recoil, to scatter, to slow. "It's working," Aisha's voice came through the comm, tight with focused excitement. "The pulse pattern is disrupting their forward momentum. We're buying time, Captain, but we need to keep the sequence synchronized across the entire fleet, or the effect breaks down." "Then let's keep it synchronized," Elena said. "Marcus, get me a direct line to every fleet commander. We do this together, or we don't do it at all." The battle at the edge of the galaxy lasted 11 hours, the longest and most complex engagement any living species had ever coordinated. Ships were lost, not as many as the grim early projections had feared, but enough that every species present would carry the weight of that day for generations. A Voth cruiser sacrificed itself to plug a gap in the shield formation when 3 Illyri vessels lost power simultaneously. A group of Skarn fighters, flying technology barely a decade old, held a critical flank for nearly 2 hours, against odds that should have overwhelmed them completely, refusing to retreat even as their shields failed one by one. And at the center of it all, the Horizons Reach, the small human ship that had once been dismissed as a doomed, reckless experiment, coordinated the pulse sequence that kept the entire fleet's defense synchronized, its crew working without rest, without pause, driven by the same stubborn refusal to quit that had carried them across the void and back in the first place. "Captain," Aisha's voice cut through the chaos near the 11th hour, exhaustion and urgency mixing in equal measure. "The swarm's forward mass is destabilizing. I think it's working. I think it's actually retreating." Elena watched the tactical display, where the vast, glowing cloud of the Devourer swarm, which had seemed unstoppable only hours earlier, began slowly pulling back from the galaxy's edge, its consuming energy scattering and dissipating into the dark from which it had come. "Confirm that," she said, not quite daring to believe it yet. "Confirmed," Dev said, his voice cracking with something between relief and disbelief. "Captain, the swarm is retreating. It's actually retreating." The bridge erupted, not in the wild celebration of victory films, but in something quieter and more genuine. Exhausted crew members, reaching for each other's hands. A few tears, that no one bothered to hide. Marcus, letting out a long, shaking breath he had clearly been holding for hours. Threx simply stood very still, staring at the tactical display, watching 2 million years of ancient warning finally come to its conclusion. "We did it," he said quietly, almost to himself. "We did it together," Elena corrected gently. "That was always the only way this was going to work, Counselor." The swarm did not vanish entirely. The archive had made clear it never truly did, only retreated back into the deep dark between galaxies, to drift and wait for its next cycle, decades or centuries away. But the galaxy had learned, in the most difficult way possible, that it was not defenseless. It had proven, together, that old rivalries and ancient prejudices could be set aside when something bigger than any single species' pride was at stake. The formal council session held 3 months after the battle looked very different from the one Elena had stood in nearly 3 years earlier. The chamber was still packed, still filled with delegates from every corner of the galaxy, but the atmosphere had changed completely. There was no condescension in the room now, no quiet laughter at the mention of humanity's ambitions. Deputy Vesic, now permanently reinstated to his old advisory role alongside Threx, stood to address the chamber before Elena even had the chance to speak. 3 years ago, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. This council told the human species that no ship of theirs could survive the void beyond our galaxy. We were wrong. Not simply about the ship. We were wrong about what this species was capable of, and wrong about what it would come to mean for every one of us. He turned to face Elena directly. "Captain Reyes, on behalf of this council, I would like to formally propose that the Horizon's Reach and its crew receive the highest honor this chamber has ever bestowed, and that the council formally recognize humanity's full and equal standing among the galaxy's founding defense powers, effective immediately." The vote that followed was unanimous, the first unanimous vote in the council's recorded history. Years later, long after the Horizon's Reach had been retired from active service and placed in careful preservation at the newly built Galactic History Museum on Vareth Station, children from a dozen different species would walk past its small, glowing hull and hear the same story their parents and grandparents had heard. The story of the ship everyone said could never survive the void, and the crew who proved that survival was never really about the ship at all. It was about refusing to accept impossible as a final answer. It was about a small, young, stubborn species that had spent its whole short history in the stars being told what it could not do, and had decided, again and again, that the only way to really know was to go and find out. Elena Reyes, older now, gray beginning to show at her temples, still visited the old ship sometimes, standing quietly beside its preserved hull, remembering the small red star at the edge of the threshold and the endless dark that had waited beyond it. "You know," she told a young Skarn cadet once, a student touring the museum as part of a joint training program between species that had once barely spoken to each other, "everyone told us this ship couldn't survive out there. Every expert, every old story, every piece of accepted wisdom this galaxy had." "What made you go anyway, Captain?" the cadet asked. Elena smiled, the same small, steady smile she had carried into a hostile council chamber all those years ago, into the endless black beyond the galaxy's edge, and into a battle no one had believed the galaxy could win. "Someone has to be the one who finds out what's actually true," she said. "Instead of just believing what everyone assumes, we figured it might as well be us." Behind her, the horizon's reach sat quiet and still in its place of honor, its faint blue glow catching the light of the museum, a small, stubborn ship that had gone farther than anyone thought possible, and come home carrying exactly what the whole galaxy needed most. Proof that impossible was simply a word people used before someone finally proved them wrong.